take a deep breath. Let your eyes gently close or soften. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, you're here now. Welcome to this soothing historical journey. Tonight, we're traveling back to the glory and grandeur of ancient Rome to peek behind the imperial curtains and discover why Roman emperors, perhaps the most powerful people in the ancient world, may have had some of the worst sleeping habits in history. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations. You've just woken up in approximately 763 years ago. Picture yourself walking through the Palatine Hill in ancient Rome, the exclusive neighborhood where emperors made their home. The early morning air carries the scent of cypress trees and distant bakeries preparing the day's bread. Guards stand at attention as you pass through doors of burnished bronze, entering the heart of imperial power, the palace of the emperor. The corridors seem endless, lined with colorful frescoes depicting mythological scenes and imperial victories. Slaves move quietly through the passageways, their feet barely making a sound on the mosaic floors as they prepare for the emperor's awakening. The palace is already alive with activity, even as the emperor himself might still be abed. You might imagine that the bedroom of the most powerful man in the world would be a place of ultimate luxury, and in many ways, it was. But not in the way our modern minds might envision. Unlike our plush mattresses and memory foam pillows, the imperial cubiculum, or bedroom, featured sleeping arrangements that might surprise you. The typical Roman bed, even an imperial one, consisted of a wooden frame strung with ropes or leather strips to support a mattress. And these mattresses, far from our modern spring and foam constructions, they were typically stuffed with wool, hay, or if one was particularly wealthy, feathers. Even Emperor Augustus, who ruled from 27 BCE to 14 CE and transformed Rome from a republic to an empire, was known to prefer a simple bed. His biographer Suetonius tells us that his bedroom furniture and bed were of the plainest sort, though this modesty may have been partly for show to reflect his supposed humble character. The imperial bedroom itself would have been surprisingly small by our standards. Romans, even wealthy ones, didn't view bedrooms as multi-purpose rooms the way we often do today. The cubiculum was primarily for sleep and intimacy, not for lounging or entertaining. The room would have been sparsely furnished, perhaps a bed, a small table for an oil lamp, and maybe a chest for clothing. What might strike you most upon entering this space is how dark it would be. Windows, if present at all, would be small openings high in the wall, sometimes covered with translucent materials like mica or thin slices of alabaster. Unlike our modern bedrooms with their blackout curtains designed to keep light out, Roman bedrooms struggled to let light in. Illumination came from oil lamps, which cast a warm, flickering glow, but provided little practical light for activities after sunset. Can you imagine trying to sleep as Emperor of Rome? The weight of the entire empire resting on your shoulders, your mind racing with political schemes, military campaigns, and the ever-present threat of assassination. Many emperors posted guards directly outside their sleeping chambers, a necessity for safety, but hardly conducive to peaceful rest. Take a moment to picture yourself lying on that imperial bed. The mattress is firmer than you're used to, perhaps with a few lumps where the wool stuffing has compressed unevenly. The pillow, often just a bolster of the same material as the mattress, supports your head at an angle that feels strange to your modern neck. The air is still, perhaps a bit close, scented with the oil from your lamps and maybe a hint of incense burned earlier to freshen the room. If you're enjoying this sensory journey into Roman imperial sleep, take a quick moment to like this video and subscribe to Historical Slumbers. We bring you these immersive historical experiences twice a month, and your support helps us continue our travels through time. I'd love to know, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you? Drop a comment below and let our community know how you're settling in for this Roman night. Now, let's explore why the most powerful men in the ancient world often struggled to find the comfort of deep sleep, despite having every luxury at their disposal. Perhaps no Roman emperor exemplifies the connection between power, paranoia, and poor sleep better than Tiberius, who ruled from 14 to 37 CE after the death of Augustus. Tiberius eventually retreated from Rome entirely, establishing himself on the island of Capri, where he lived in a villa complex cut into the very rock of the island. Imagine yourself on Capri on a warm summer night. The sea breeze brings relief from the day's heat as it rustles through the gardens of the Villa Jovis, Tiberius' primary residence on the island. Standing 12 stories tall in some sections and built on multiple levels down the cliffside, this was no simple retreat. The villa complex covered over 75,000 square feet, with spectacular views of the Bay of Naples, a view that, ironically, the increasingly reclusive emperor may have rarely appreciated in his later years. According to the historian Suetonius, Tiberius suffered from chronic insomnia, a condition that only worsened as his reign progressed. Can you imagine the scene? The aging emperor pacing his bedchamber at night, perhaps pausing occasionally to look out over the dark waters of the Mediterranean, his mind filled with suspicions of plots against him. Many imagined, but some very real. The historian tells us that Tiberius typically slept with his eyes partially open, a peculiarity that unnerved those around him. Modern medical experts might recognize this as a condition called nocturnal legophthalmos, which can indeed contribute to poor sleep quality and dry, irritated eyes upon waking. For those who attended to the emperor, however, this unnatural sleep habit likely only enhanced the aura of uneasy watchfulness that surrounded him. But Tiberius wasn't alone in his sleep struggles. Let's consider Caligula, who ruled from 37 to 41 CE, and whose name has become synonymous with erratic behavior and cruelty. Historical accounts suggest he rarely slept more than 3 hours a night. Close your eyes and picture the young emperor walking the corridors of his palace in the dead of night, tormented by what the Roman writer Suetonius described as disturbing visions. He never rested for more than 3 hours at night, and even then his sleep was not undisturbed, but terrified by strange apparitions, wrote Suetonius. In our modern understanding, this combination of insomnia and nightmares might suggest anything from anxiety to more serious psychiatric conditions, possibly exacerbated by the unlimited power he wielded. Imagine the loneliness of those nights. The most powerful man in the world, surrounded by luxury, yet unable to purchase the simple comfort of restful sleep. The palace would be eerily quiet, with only the occasional footstep of a guard or the distant call of a night bird breaking the silence. The shadows cast by oil lamps would dance on walls decorated with intricate frescoes, perhaps distorting the painted figures in ways that fed the emperor's troubled mind. For many Roman emperors, the bedroom was not just a place of rest, but of extreme vulnerability. Julius Caesar, who never officially took the title of emperor, but set the stage for imperial Rome, was famously troubled by insomnia in his later years. Plutarch tells us that Caesar would often stay up reading or dictating letters during his campaigns, using the quiet night hours when others slept to attend to matters of state. While this might sound like productive use of sleepless time, it speaks to the restlessness that plagued many who held supreme power. Ask yourself, how well would you sleep if you knew there were people actively plotting your assassination? For Roman emperors, this wasn't paranoia, it was reality. Of the first 12 Caesars, from Julius Caesar to Domitian, 8 died by assassination. The bedroom, a place of peace and restoration for most of us, was for them often the most dangerous room in the palace. Take a deep breath and feel the weight of that constant vigilance. The soft mattress beneath you feels less comforting when you wonder if someone might slip a dagger between your ribs before morning. The quiet of night, rather than soothing, becomes ominous, filled with imagined footsteps and whispered conspiracies. Now, let's return to ancient Rome and explore how the emperor's daily routines impacted their nightly rest. The Roman day followed a different rhythm than our own. While we might structure our days around the clock, Romans organized their time around the natural cycles of light. Their day was divided into 12 hours from sunrise to sunset, and the night likewise into 12 hours from sunset to sunrise. This meant that the actual length of an hour varied throughout the year, longer daylight hours in summer and shorter in winter. Imagine yourself as Emperor Marcus Aurelius, known to history as the philosopher emperor, awakening in your palace bedroom as the first light of dawn filters through the small window. For Marcus, as for many Romans, the day began early, what they called prima lux, or first light. Unlike many of his more indulgent predecessors, Marcus was known for his disciplined lifestyle, rising before dawn to begin his work. As emperor, your mornings would begin with the salutatio, a formal greeting where clients and citizens would come to pay their respects and perhaps ask favors. This ancient version of office hours might start as early as sunrise and continue for several hours. Imagine standing in the atrium of your palace, perhaps still tired from a restless night, receiving a stream of senators, foreign dignitaries, and common citizens, while maintaining the dignity expected of your position. The pressure to appear alert and imperial, even when exhausted, must have been immense. The historian Cassius Dio tells us that Marcus Aurelius would sometimes hear legal cases until nearly noon, focusing intently on the matters at hand, allowing each case all the time that it required. Can you feel the mental fatigue that would build from such concentrated attention, especially following a night of poor sleep? After these morning obligations came the business of running an empire, meetings with advisors, reading and dictating correspondence, perhaps receiving reports from distant provinces. For an emperor like Hadrian, who ruled from 117 to 138 CE and was known for his hands-on approach to governance, these administrative duties might extend well into the afternoon. Then came physical exercise, an important part of the Roman daily routine for men of all social classes. Many emperors maintained the traditional Roman emphasis on physical fitness, exercising in the palace grounds or at one of Rome's public baths. The philosopher Seneca describes how even the elderly Emperor Augustus maintained a regimen of ball games and swimming. This physical activity would have helped combat the stress of imperial duties and potentially improved sleep quality. One healthy habit we still recognize today. By mid-afternoon, a Roman emperor would typically take his main meal, what they called cena. While early Romans ate simply, by imperial times, this meal had evolved into an elaborate affair that could last for hours. Reclining on dining couches, not sitting as we do today, emperors and their guests would work their way through multiple courses of food, accompanied by wine that was typically diluted with water. Picture yourself at such an imperial dinner. The room is alive with conversation, perhaps filled with senators, military commanders, and cultural figures. Slaves move efficiently between the couches, serving elaborate dishes, perhaps peacock stuffed with sausages, wild boar, exotic fruits, and seafood brought to the capital from across the empire. The wine flows freely, though a wise emperor like Augustus was known to drink moderately, aware that loose tongues around him might reveal useful information. These elaborate meals, often consumed late in the day and featuring rich, heavy foods, would hardly have been conducive to good sleep. Modern sleep science tells us that eating large meals close to bedtime can disrupt sleep patterns, causing discomfort and triggering digestive processes that keep the body active when it should be winding down. For emperors who indulged heavily at these meals, like the notoriously gluttonous Vitellius, who ruled briefly in 69 CE, the physical discomfort of overeating would have added yet another barrier to restful sleep. Then there was the Roman relationship with wine. While Romans typically diluted their wine with water, drinking it neat was considered barbaric, they still consumed it in quantities that would raise eyebrows today. Emperor Claudius, who ruled from 41 to 54 CE, was known to fall asleep at banquets after overindulging, only to be awakened and continue eating, hardly a recipe for healthy sleep patterns. After dinner came what might have been the only true leisure time in an emperor's day, a time for conversation, perhaps enjoying poetry readings, music, or other entertainments. As night fell, oil lamps would be lit throughout the palace, their flickering light creating a warm but dim environment. Without the bright artificial light that keeps our modern brains alert well into the night, Romans would naturally have begun to feel the pull of sleep as darkness descended. Yet for all the power they wielded, Roman emperors couldn't command the natural world. The Roman home, even an imperial palace, would be hot in summer and cold in winter. While the wealthy had hypocausts, an underfloor heating system, these were typically found in bathhouses rather than bedrooms. In winter, Braziers with hot coals might provide some warmth, but they also presented a risk of fire and could release carbon monoxide, a sleep-disrupting and potentially lethal problem in poorly ventilated rooms. Imagine trying to sleep on a winter night in Rome where the temperature can fall close to freezing. Even in a palace, drafts would find their way through windows and doors. Your body is wrapped in blankets, perhaps a woolen cloak atop your sleeping tunic, but your nose and cheeks feel the chill of the night air. Or think of a summer night during a Roman heat wave. The thick stone walls of the palace having trapped the day's heat, the air still unoppressive despite slaves waving fans to create some relief. Is it any wonder that many emperors struggled with sleep? Between the physical discomforts, the mental burdens of rule, and the ever-present fear of conspiracy, the imperial bed must often have been a place of tossing and turning rather than peaceful rest. If you're finding this exploration of imperial sleep habits interesting, remember to give this video a thumbs up. Your engagement helps our channel grow, allowing us to continue these historical sleep journeys. And I'm curious, do any of these imperial sleep struggles sound familiar to you? Perhaps you've experienced your own version of the emperor's insomnia? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let's delve deeper into the unique sleep practices and superstitions that shaped how Roman emperors approached the night. Romans, including their emperors, approached sleep with a mixture of practical wisdom and superstitious belief. They recognized sleep as essential for health, but also viewed dreams as potentially prophetic, a direct channel through which the gods might communicate with mortals. Imagine yourself as Emperor Augustus, preparing for bed in your relatively modest imperial cubiculum. As the most powerful man in Rome, your sleep rituals would be attended with particular care. Perhaps you might place a black stone, obsidian, under your pillow, as many Romans did to ward off bad dreams. The smooth, cool stone was thought to absorb negative energies that might disturb your rest. Augustus, according to his biographer Suetonius, was particularly attentive to his dreams, believing they could foretell the future. He once issued an edict requiring anyone who dreamed about him to proclaim it in the marketplace the next morning, a practice that must have resulted in some creative public storytelling and added to the emperor's mystique. The connection between sleep and divination was particularly strong in Roman culture. The practice of incubation, sleeping in a sacred place to receive divine guidance through dreams, was well established. While this was typically done in temples dedicated to healing gods like Asclepius, some emperors created similar conditions within their palaces. The Emperor Caracalla, for instance, was said to sleep in a temple-like setting where he hoped to receive divine guidance through his dreams. Romans also practiced what we might call sleep hygiene, though their methods differed from our modern approaches. Pliny the Elder, the Roman author and naturalist, recommended specific herbs to induce sleep, including anise and dill. For particularly troubled sleepers, he suggested placing dill seeds beneath the pillow, where their aroma might promote restful sleep throughout the night. For emperors suffering from insomnia, physicians might prepare special concoctions. One such remedy, documented in ancient medical texts, combined the juice of lettuce, which Romans believed had soporific properties, with wine, honey, and poppy, the latter containing natural opiates that would indeed have induced drowsiness. These sleeping draughts were common among the wealthy, though their effectiveness likely varied widely. The use of such substances for sleep wasn't without controversy, even then. The Stoic philosophers, whose teachings influenced emperors like Marcus Aurelius, advocated for moderation in all things and natural living. They would have viewed reliance on sleep-inducing substances as a form of weakness, yet another pressure on emperors who were expected to embody Roman virtues of strength and self-control. Can you picture an emperor like Hadrian, troubled by insomnia after a day of administrative duties, debating whether to call for a sleeping draft? The decision carries more weight than it might for a private citizen. If word spreads that the emperor requires medicine to sleep, might it not suggest weakness to potential rivals? Yet another night without proper rest would diminish his effectiveness the following day. Even the most personal decisions about sleep carried political implications for those who wore the purple. Another uniquely Roman practice that affected imperial sleep was the use of sleep slaves. servants whose sole purpose was to help their masters rest comfortably. These specialized slaves might recite soothing poetry, play soft music on a lyre, fan their master on hot nights, or simply watch over them as they slept. For paranoid emperors like Domitian, who ruled from 81 to 96 CE and was known for his suspicion of those around him, these slaves provided both comfort and an extra layer of security. Imagine drifting to sleep as Emperor Domitian, the soft voice of your sleep slave reciting calming verses from Virgil's Eclogues, the pastoral imagery of shepherds and their flocks, gradually blending with your own thoughts as you slip into slumber. The slave continues long after you've fallen asleep, their voice a constant, soothing presence designed to keep nightmares at bay. The imperial bedroom itself was often arranged according to certain principles meant to promote good sleep. The orientation of the bed was considered important, ideally positioned so that the sleeper's head pointed toward the east, allowing them to awaken with the rising sun. The ancient Roman architect Vitruvius recommended that bedrooms be designed to receive the morning light, believing this helped align the body with natural rhythms. Some emperors took additional precautions that reflected their personal anxieties. The Emperor Domitian reportedly had the walls of his bedroom lined with reflective stone, allowing him to see anyone who might enter while he slept. Less paranoid rulers might simply keep a sword or dagger within reach, a practical precaution in a culture where assassination was a recognized political tool. We also know that Romans, unlike us, didn't typically sleep in one 8-hour block. Historical evidence suggests they practiced what sleep researchers now call biphasic sleep, sleeping for several hours in the night, waking for a period, then returning to sleep until dawn. This wakeful period in the middle of the night might be used for reflection, reading by lamplight, intimate moments with a spouse, or even attending to minor matters of state that couldn't wait until morning. Picture Emperor Antoninus Pius, known for his conscientious rule from 138 to 161 CE, waking in the quiet hours after midnight. While the palace sleeps around him, he might light an oil lamp and unroll a scroll containing reports from a distant province, using these peaceful hours to consider a complex problem away from the distractions and demands of the imperial court. This middle-of-the-night wakefulness, rather than being considered insomnia as we might view it today, was an accepted and even valued part of the sleep cycle. For Roman emperors, sleep was not merely a physical necessity, but a vulnerable state with spiritual and political dimensions. The dreams they experienced carried weight, not just personal meaning, but potentially divine messages or omens about the empire's future. Suetonius records that Julius Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, dreamed of her husband's assassination the night before it occurred. Caesar, having received other worrying omens, was inclined to heed her warning, but was persuaded by conspirators to attend the Senate meeting where he met his end. Sleep and its visions could be matters of life and death. Little wonder, then, that imperial sleep was approached with ritual and care, the boundary between superstition and practical precaution often blurred. The emperor's rest was not merely a personal matter, but one that could affect the entire empire. A ruler suffering from sleep deprivation might make poor decisions, show irritability in diplomatic situations, or fail to notice threats until too late. The health of the empire was, in many ways, tied to the quality of the emperor's sleep. We're about halfway through our journey into imperial sleep habits. If you're enjoying this historical exploration, now would be a perfect time to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And if you're finding the information valuable, consider sharing this video with someone who appreciates history or perhaps struggles with their own sleep. Our next segment will delve into some of the most notorious imperial insomniacs and how their sleep disorders may have shaped Roman history. While many Roman emperors likely struggled with sleep, historical records highlight several rulers whose sleep disturbances were so severe or notorious that they became part of their historical legacy. Perhaps the most famous imperial insomniac was Caligula, whose name has become synonymous with madness and excess. Close your eyes and transport yourself to the imperial palace around 39 CE. The night is still, but Emperor Caligula is very much awake. According to Suetonius, he rarely slept more than 3 hours per night, often found wandering the colonnades of his palace. restlessly waiting for dawn, sometimes calling for daylight in the middle of the night, a command even an emperor couldn't enforce. Sound effect, footsteps echoing in a marble corridor. He never rested more than 3 hours in the night, and even then his sleep was not uninterrupted, Suetonius writes. Modern sleep medicine would recognize this chronic sleep deprivation as potentially catastrophic for mental health. The connection between Caligula's infamous erratic behavior, cruel decisions, and his severe sleep deprivation seems difficult to ignore from our modern perspective. Imagine the psychological impact of years of sleeping just 3 hours per night. The hallucinations that Suetonius mentions, strange apparitions that haunted Caligula's brief periods of sleep, may have been hypnagogic hallucinations, a known effect of severe sleep deprivation. His notorious mood swings, paranoia, and increasingly bizarre behavior during his reign align perfectly with what we now know happens to the human mind when chronically deprived of adequate rest. Tense music begins softly. The historical record suggests that Caligula would sometimes order executions in the middle of the night, summoning unfortunate victims from their beds to face his midnight judgment. The contrast is stark. While ordinary Romans slept peacefully, their emperor prowled the palace halls, his sleeplessness becoming a terror for others. His infamous declaration that he wished the Roman people had but one neck that he might cut it speaks to a mind possibly unraveled by chronic sleep loss. Another emperor whose sleep patterns entered the historical record was Claudius, who ruled from 41 to 54 CE after Caligula's assassination. Unlike his predecessor's insomnia, Claudius suffered from what appears to have been sleep apnea, combined with a tendency to fall asleep at inappropriate times, what modern medicine might diagnose as hypersomnia or narcolepsy. Music fades, sound effect, heavy, labored breathing. Suetonius tells us that Claudius would often fall asleep during the day, even during legal proceedings, needing to be awakened by his advisors. At banquets, he would fall asleep after eating, sometimes with food still in his mouth, and had to be roused to continue the meal. These episodes subjected him to ridicule, a dangerous situation for any ruler, but particularly one whose hold on power was already tenuous. Modern medical experts reviewing these historical descriptions have suggested that Claudius likely suffered from obstructive sleep apnea, a condition where breathing repeatedly stops and starts during sleep. This condition would have prevented him from entering the deeper, more restorative stages of sleep, leading to his daytime drowsiness despite apparently adequate hours in bed. Imagine being Claudius, exhausted despite spending sufficient time sleeping, constantly fighting to stay awake during important state functions, aware of the mocking glances exchanged by senators when your head begins to nod. The emperor's struggle with sleep became another mark against him in a court already inclined to view him as unfit due to his physical disabilities and perceived lack of dignity. Then there was Nero, who ruled from 54 to 68 CE and whose sleep was reportedly haunted by his crimes. After the assassination of his mother, Agrippina, historical accounts suggest he suffered severe nightmares and required constant entertainment through the night to distract him from his guilt and fear. Suetonius writes that after his mother's death, Nero was frequently terrified by his mother's ghost and by the whips and burning torches of the Furies. Picture Nero lying awake in his lavish bedroom in the Domus Aurea, his golden house built after the Great Fire of Rome. Despite the unprecedented luxury surrounding him, walls adorned with gold leaf and precious stones, ceilings that showered flower petals upon guests, sleep eludes him. Every shadow cast by his oil lamp seems to take the shape of his murdered mother. Every unexpected sound in the night, a harbinger of divine punishment. Eerie music begins softly. To combat these terrors, Nero surrounded himself with constant activity and entertainment, even at night. Musicians, actors, and companions would be commanded to perform at all hours, creating an atmosphere where the boundary between day and night blurred. This disruption of natural circadian rhythms would only have worsened any existing sleep difficulties, creating a vicious cycle of sleep deprivation and increasing mental instability. The connection between sleep and mental stability appears repeatedly in accounts of imperial Rome, Emperor Otho, who ruled briefly in 69 CE during the tumultuous year of the Four Emperors, was said to be troubled by nightmares of his predecessor Galba, whom he had betrayed and murdered. Plutarch writes that Otho was disturbed by dreams and restless throughout the night, hearing phantom sounds and believing Galba's ghost was pulling him from his bed. Sound effect? Bed creaking, startled gasping. Imagine the psychological weight of such experiences. The most powerful man in the known world, commanding vast armies and unimaginable wealth, yet unable to command peaceful sleep, tormented by the ghosts of his own making. The private hell of an emperor's sleepless nights serves as a powerful reminder that no amount of worldly power can guarantee the simple blessing of restful slumber. Not all imperial sleep disturbances were as dramatic as Caligula's insomnia or Nero's nightmares. Some emperors simply struggled with the common sleep challenges that come with advancing age. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled from 161 to 180 CE, mentions sleep difficulties in his philosophical work, Meditations, suggesting he used the wakeful hours of night for self-reflection and philosophical contemplation. Music shifts to something more contemplative. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, "I have to go to work as a human being," Marcus wrote, suggesting his own struggles with morning fatigue. Yet, unlike emperors who fought against their sleep difficulties with wine or entertainment, Marcus appears to have incorporated his nights of partial wakefulness into his Stoic practice, using the quiet hours for the inner work of philosophical reflection. Picture the philosopher emperor sitting up in bed, perhaps wrapped in a warm blanket against the night chill, a small oil lamp casting just enough light for him to jot down the thoughts that would eventually become his Meditations, one of the most enduring works of Stoic philosophy. In his case, periods of nighttime wakefulness became not a curse, but an opportunity for the contemplation that his busy days rarely permitted. The varying approaches these emperors took to their sleep difficulties reveal much about their characters and ruling styles. Caligula fought his insomnia with increasingly erratic behavior and cruelty. Claudius appears to have simply endured his sleep disorder, suffering the consequences to his reputation. Nero sought constant distraction from the thoughts that kept him awake. Marcus Aurelius embraced wakeful periods as opportunities for reflection. For those listening who may struggle with their own sleep difficulties, there's perhaps some comfort in knowing that even the most powerful figures in history faced similar challenges. The Roman imperial bedroom, for all its luxury and status, was often a place of struggle rather than rest. A reminder that peaceful sleep, then as now, is a treasure that can elude even those who seem to have everything. If you're still with us on this historical journey, thank you for your attention. Take a moment to like this video if you're finding value in our exploration of imperial sleep habits. And if you've ever had your own battles with insomnia or other sleep disturbances, know that you're in distinguished company. Though hopefully your sleep challenges haven't led to the extreme behaviors of emperors like Caligula or Nero. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Now, let's turn our attention to how the sleep habits of Roman emperors may have influenced their decision-making and, by extension, the course of history itself. The connection between sleep and decision-making is well established in modern neuroscience. Sleep deprivation impairs judgment, increases risk-taking behavior, reduces emotional control, and diminishes cognitive flexibility, all critical faculties for effective leadership. When we examine some of the most controversial or catastrophic decisions made by Roman emperors, we might wonder how many were influenced by chronic sleep deprivation. Consider Caligula's infamous decision to declare himself a living god, demanding worship and having statues of himself placed in temples throughout the empire, an act that deeply offended both Roman religious sensibilities and Jewish monotheistic beliefs. This decision, made after months of what historical accounts describe as near sleepless nights, displays the grandiosity and poor judgment characteristic of severe sleep deprivation. Sound effect? Distant crowd murmuring in disapproval. Imagine yourself as a senator in Rome, hearing the imperial proclamation that your emperor now considers himself divine and expects appropriate worship. The news spreads through the Senate House in hushed, incredulous whispers. You exchange glances with colleagues, wondering if the man commanding the world's most powerful armies has lost his mind. What you cannot see are the dark circles beneath the emperor's eyes, the physical manifestation of nights spent pacing the palace corridors rather than sleeping. Modern sleep research tells us that chronic sleep deprivation affects the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain responsible for complex decision-making, impulse control, and social behavior. A sleep-deprived brain increasingly relies on emotional rather than rational processing, becomes more susceptible to negative stimuli, and struggles to accurately assess risk. Looking at the behavior of emperors like Caligula through this lens offers a new perspective on their more irrational actions. Contemplative music begins. Nero's decision to blame Christians for the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE, leading to brutal persecutions, came during a period when historical accounts suggest he was suffering from severe sleep disturbances. His increasingly erratic behavior following the fire, including his focus on artistic performances while Rome rebuilt, aligns with the impaired priority setting seen in sleep-deprived individuals. Emperor Commodus, who ruled from 180 to 192 CE and was portrayed with considerable artistic license in the film Gladiator, provides another potential example of sleep-disrupted decision-making. Historical accounts suggest that toward the end of his reign, Commodus was staying awake through much of the night engaged in gladiatorial training, disrupting his sleep cycles. During this same period, his governing became increasingly eccentric. He renamed Rome Colonia Commodiana after himself, renamed all 12 months of the year to reflect his own titles, and declared himself the reincarnation of Hercules, appearing in public dressed in a lion skin and carrying a club. Music fades, sound effect, the sound of sword practice, metal striking metal. Can you picture Commodus in the imperial palace's private training area, exhausting himself with gladiatorial exercises deep into the night while the business of empire waits unattended? His body, pushed beyond natural limits, operates on a surge of stress hormones rather than restful recovery. The next day, with his judgment clouded by fatigue, he makes another proclamation that causes his advisors to exchange worried glances. Perhaps a new tax to fund gladiatorial games, or another self-aggrandizing title to add to his already lengthy list. Not all sleep-influenced imperial decisions were as obviously problematic as those of Caligula, Nero, or Commodus. Sometimes sleep disruption may have manifested in more subtle ways that still affected governance. The Emperor Hadrian, known for his restless energy and constant travels throughout the empire, was described by his contemporaries as working through the night on administrative matters and sleeping very little. While his reign is generally considered successful, his sometimes severe mood swings and occasional harsh treatment of subordinates might reflect the emotional dysregulation that comes with chronic sleep restriction. Sound effect: quill scratching. Imagine Hadrian working by lamplight, his administrative staff struggling to keep pace as he dictates letters, edicts, and architectural plans into the early hours of the morning. His mind races from one imperial project to another, unable to slow down enough for proper rest. When dawn comes, he's already reviewing reports from Britain or planning his next inspection of the German frontier, operating on minimal sleep but maximum determination. His achievements were remarkable, but at what cost to his physical and mental well-being? For some emperors, sleep disturbances may have contributed to paranoia that had very real political consequences. The Emperor Domitian, who ruled from 81 to 96 CE, became increasingly suspicious of those around him in the latter part of his reign. Suetonius tells us he had the walls of his palace hallways lined with reflective stone so he could see who was behind him at all times. A physical manifestation of his growing paranoia. Tense music begins softly. While some level of caution was certainly justified in imperial Rome, Domitian's fear escalated to the point where he ordered the execution of numerous senators and officials based on increasingly thin suspicions. Modern understanding of sleep deprivation's effects on threat perception offers a possible contributing factor to this behavior. Studies show that sleep-deprived individuals tend to perceive neutral expressions as threatening and overestimate risks, precisely the pattern seen in Domitian's later reign. The decisions of Roman emperors didn't just affect their personal lives or even just Rome itself. They shaped the course of Western civilization. When Marcus Aurelius designated his son Commodus as his successor, rather than adopting a capable leader as previous emperors had done, was this decision influenced by the fatigue of his final years? The choice ultimately led to a ruler whose incompetence began the slow decline of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace that had brought unprecedented stability to the Mediterranean world. Music shifts to something more melancholic. Similarly, when Caracalla, ruling from 211 to 217 CE, decided to murder his brother and co-emperor Geta in their mother's arms, was his judgment affected by what historical accounts describe as chronic insomnia and nightmares. This fratricidal act shocked Rome and was followed by a purge of Geta's supporters that reportedly claimed the lives of 20,000 people. The impulsivity and emotional dysregulation typical of sleep deprivation align uncomfortably well with Caracalla's actions. For those of us listening from the comfort of our modern lives, there's a sobering lesson here about the importance of rest for those who hold power. The Roman experience suggests that sleep deprivation in leaders can have consequences that ripple far beyond their personal health, affecting countless lives through impaired decision-making. It's a lesson as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago, perhaps even more so in our age of nuclear weapons and global interconnection. Before we continue to our next section, I'd like to thank you for joining me on this historical journey. If you're finding these connections between sleep and historical events interesting, please consider subscribing to our channel for more explorations of how sleep has shaped history. And I'm curious, has this discussion made you think differently about the importance of sleep for those in positions of power? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Now let's turn our attention to the sleep environment of Imperial Rome, the physical context that either supported or hindered the emperor's rest. The physical environment in which we sleep profoundly affects our sleep quality. For Roman emperors, despite their immense wealth and power, the sleeping conditions were in many ways challenging by our modern standards. To truly understand imperial sleep, we need to explore the material realities of the Roman bedroom. Close your eyes and imagine yourself in an imperial cubiculum on the Palatine Hill. The room is smaller than you might expect, perhaps 12 feet square, with walls painted in rich reds, blues, and golds depicting mythological scenes or peaceful landscapes. A small window high in the wall provides minimal ventilation but little light. The floor is likely mosaic, beautiful but cool to the touch, perhaps partially covered with rugs of Egyptian manufacture. Sound effect: distant city sounds fading as a door closes. The centerpiece of the room is the bed itself, far different from our modern mattresses. The typical Roman bed, even an imperial one, consisted of a wooden frame supported by interlaced ropes or leather straps. On top of this lay the mattress, typically stuffed with wool, though the wealthiest Romans might use feathers. These mattresses lacked the support and pressure distribution of modern designs, requiring frequent restuffing as the filling compressed and shifted with use. Can you feel it beneath you? The mattress is firmer than you're accustomed to, with subtle lumps and depressions where the stuffing has shifted. The support is uneven. You might find yourself unconsciously adjusting position through the night to avoid pressure points. For emperors with access to the empire's finest craftsmen, these beds would be the best available, yet still fundamentally limited by the technology and materials of the time. Sound effect: subtle rustling of bedding as someone shifts position. Pillows were similarly basic, often just bolsters filled with the same material as the mattress. These would provide basic head support, but lacked the ergonomic design we now consider essential for proper spinal alignment during sleep. Some Romans used wooden headrests similar to those found in ancient Egypt, though these were more common in the eastern provinces than in Rome itself. The bedding would include sheets made of linen for summer or wool for winter. Wealthier Romans, including emperors, might have sheets of silk imported at great expense from China via the Silk Road. Blankets were typically wool, sometimes with embroidered decoration for the elite. In colder weather, animal furs might be added for warmth, perhaps bear or wolf skins in the imperial household. Contemplative music begins softly. Temperature regulation posed a significant challenge. Roman buildings, with their thick stone walls, remained relatively cool in summer but could be uncomfortably cold in winter. The hypocaust system, underfloor heating that circulated hot air from furnaces through hollow spaces beneath floors and within walls, was typically used in bathhouses rather than private quarters, and certainly not kept running through the night due to the need for slaves to maintain the fires. Instead, braziers containing hot coals provided localized heating in bedrooms, but these came with their own risks. Fire was a constant danger in ancient Rome, where buildings were often constructed with significant amounts of wood despite their stone exteriors. More insidiously, poorly ventilated rooms with burning braziers could fill with carbon monoxide, causing headaches, confusion, and even death. The Emperor Augustus was known to fear fire to such a degree that he preferred to endure cold rather than have braziers in his bedroom at night. The soft crackle of coals in a brazier. Imagine trying to find the right balance between warmth and safety on a winter night in Rome. The brazier provides a circle of heat that gradually diminishes as you move away from it. Your face feels the warmth while your back remains cool. The room's air grows increasingly stale as the night progresses, the small window insufficient for proper ventilation. By morning, you might wake with a dull headache from the carbon monoxide, a common but unrecognized sleep disruptor in the ancient world. In summer, the challenge was heat rather than cold. Rome could be swelteringly hot in July and August, with temperatures regularly exceeding 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 degrees Celsius. Without air conditioning, nights offered little relief, especially during heat waves. Slaves might be employed to fan the emperor as he attempted to sleep, but the effectiveness of this method was limited at best. Music fades, sound effect, rhythmic sound of a fan being moved back and forth. Suetonius tells us that Augustus would sleep outdoors in courtyards during hot weather, or have slaves sprinkle water around his bedroom to cool the air through evaporation, an early form of evaporative cooling. The Emperor Elagabalus, known for his excesses, reportedly slept on a mattress stuffed with hair fur in summer, believing it had cooling properties and had snow brought down from the mountains to cool his sleeping quarters, an extravagant use of imperial resources for personal comfort. Light control was another challenge. Romans typically rose with the sun and retired not long after sunset, their days governed by natural light. The oil lamps that provided artificial light were dim by our standards and posed their own fire risks. For emperors who needed to work into the night or who suffered from insomnia, the options for comfortable lighting were limited. Too much light would inhibit sleep, but too little made any nighttime activity difficult. Noise presented yet another sleep challenge. While the imperial palace was somewhat removed from the bustle of Rome's streets, the city was notoriously loud. The ancient poet Juvenal complained of the diverse noises of the city that prevented sleep, including the creaking of passing wagons and the swearing of drivers stuck in traffic. Even within the palace, the movement of guards, slaves, and officials created a background of sound that modern sleepers would find disruptive. Some emperors took extraordinary measures to control their sleep environment. Nero's Domus Aurea reportedly included bedrooms lined with ivory panels that could be slid open to shower guests with flower petals and perfume, a sensory experience designed to delight but perhaps not conducive to restful sleep. The Emperor Elagabalus was said to sleep on quilts stuffed with hair down and upholstered with rose petals, the floral scent intended to promote pleasant dreams. Sound effect, soft rustling of flower petals. Beyond these physical aspects of the sleep environment, there was the human element. Emperors rarely slept completely alone. Guards would be stationed near the imperial bedchamber, their presence both a protection and a potential disruption. For married emperors, their wives might share their bed, though separate bedrooms for spouses were not uncommon among the Roman elite. Many emperors also kept the company of concubines, adding another layer of complexity to the imperial sleeping arrangements. Then there were the sleep slaves, mentioned earlier, servants whose sole duty was to help their master achieve restful sleep. These slaves might recite poetry, play soft music, fan the emperor on hot nights, or simply watch over him as he slept. While intended to promote better rest, The presence of another person in or near the bedchamber would have introduced yet another potential sleep disruption. What emerges from this examination of the imperial sleep environment is a picture of remarkable luxury by ancient standards, yet significant limitation by our own. Despite commanding vast resources and having access to the finest craftsmanship in the known world, Roman emperors slept in conditions that modern sleep science would consider suboptimal at best, on uncomfortable mattresses in poorly ventilated rooms with inadequate temperature control and limited options for managing light and noise. Is it any wonder, then, that imperial insomnia features so prominently in historical accounts? The most powerful men in the ancient world, for all their wealth and authority, could not command the environmental conditions that we now know are essential for quality sleep. Their struggle reminds us that sleep is a biological necessity that cannot be overcome simply through power or wealth, a humbling equalizer between emperor and commoner, ancient and modern. And yet some emperors did manage to sleep well despite these challenges. Augustus, despite his various health problems, was known to sleep soundly once he retired for the night, typically for around 7 hours, according to Suetonius. His focus on moderation in food and drink, regular exercise, and a disciplined daily routine may have helped overcome the limitations of his physical sleep environment. There are lessons here for our own sleep hygiene, reminding us that good habits can sometimes compensate for less than ideal sleeping conditions. We're continuing our journey through Imperial Roman sleep habits, and I appreciate you staying with us. If you're finding this exploration valuable, please take a moment to like this video and consider sharing it with friends who enjoy history or are interested in sleep science. I'd also love to know, how do you think your sleep would fare in an Imperial Roman bedroom? Let us know in the comments below. Now, let's contrast the sleep habits of emperors with those of ordinary Romans to gain a fuller picture of sleep in the ancient world. While Roman emperors struggled with sleep despite their privilege, how did sleep differ for the common people of Rome? The contrast between imperial and ordinary sleep provides fascinating insights into both Roman society and the nature of sleep itself. Imagine yourself now not in the imperial palace, but in an insula, a multi-story apartment building where most urban Romans lived. The room is small, perhaps just 10 feet square, housing an entire family. Unlike the spacious imperial cubiculum, this space serves multiple functions. Cooking, eating, living, and sleeping all occur within the same cramped quarters. Privacy, a luxury we now associate with sleep, was largely absent for ordinary Romans. Sound effect, muffled conversations, a baby crying distantly, footsteps overhead. Where the emperor slept on a proper bed with a wool-stuffed mattress, common Romans often slept on simple pallets laid directly on the floor, or on stuffed sacks that served as primitive mattresses. The poorest might sleep on nothing more than a straw mat. Bedding would be minimal, perhaps a woolen blanket in winter, often shared among family members for warmth. Can you feel the hardness of the floor beneath the thin pallet, the rougher texture of the coarse wool blanket against your skin? The emperor's mattress might have been uncomfortable by our standards, but it represented unimaginable luxury compared to the sleeping arrangements of most of his subjects. Contemplative music begins softly. The sleeping environment for common Romans presented challenges beyond those faced by emperors. Where imperial bedrooms were relatively spacious and often designed specifically for sleep, ordinary Romans slept in crowded conditions, often with multiple family members sharing the same space or even the same sleeping surface. The noise level would have been considerably higher. Thin walls meant that sounds from neighboring apartments were clearly audible, while the streets below would echo with the sounds of carts, animals, and pedestrians well into the night. Temperature regulation posed even greater challenges for common Romans than for their emperors. Without access to high-quality building materials or heating systems, ordinary apartments would be drafty in winter and stifling in summer. The upper floors of insulae were particularly vulnerable to temperature extremes, becoming unbearably hot in summer as the sun beat down on their flat roofs. Unlike emperors who could command slaves to fan them or bring snow from the mountains, common Romans had to endure these conditions with little relief. Fire presented an even greater risk for ordinary Romans than for the imperial household. Insulae were notorious fire traps, often constructed hastily with substandard materials. Residents using open flames for cooking and heating in cramped quarters created constant danger. The anxiety associated with this risk, knowing that fires frequently ravaged entire neighborhoods, must have affected the quality of sleep for many urban Romans. Light pollution affected common Romans differently than it did emperors. Where imperial households could afford the best oil lamps and abundant fuel, allowing for control over artificial lighting, ordinary Romans often had to choose between darkness and the expense of lamp oil. Many simply aligned their sleep schedules with natural light, going to bed not long after sunset and rising at dawn, a pattern that actually aligns better with natural circadian rhythms than many of our modern sleep schedules. Music transitions to something more upbeat. Yet, despite these apparent disadvantages, there's reason to believe that ordinary Romans may have slept better than their emperors in some important ways. Free from the constant pressures of governing an empire, they were less likely to suffer from the stress-induced insomnia that plagued many rulers. Without enemies constantly plotting their demise, they could sleep without the paranoia that kept emperors like Domitian staring at their bedroom doors. The physical labor that characterized most Romans' daily lives, whether in workshops, fields, or homes, would have produced the kind of healthy physical fatigue that promotes deep sleep. Modern sleep science confirms that regular physical activity contributes significantly to sleep quality, suggesting that the blacksmith or farmer may have enjoyed more restorative rest than the sedentary emperor, despite their humbler accommodations. Sound effect: rhythmic hammering of a blacksmith, fading out. Diet likely played a role as well. Where emperors indulged in elaborate feasts featuring exotic ingredients and multiple courses, often consuming their main meal late in the day, ordinary Romans ate more simply. Their diet centered on grain, vegetables, and fruits, with meat as an occasional luxury rather than a daily expectation. They typically ate their main meal at midday rather than in the evening. This simpler diet, consumed earlier in the day, would have been more conducive to good sleep than the rich late meals of the imperial household. Alcohol consumption patterns differed as well. While both emperors and commoners drank wine, ordinary Romans always diluted it with water, a practice that some emperors and elites abandoned in favor of stronger drink. Moderate consumption of diluted wine would have had less impact on sleep quality than the heavier drinking that historical accounts attribute to emperors like Tiberius in his later years. Music fades out. Perhaps most importantly, ordinary Romans lacked the crushing weight of ultimate responsibility that contributed to imperial insomnia. The decisions they made affected their families and perhaps their immediate communities, but not the fate of millions across 3 continents. This difference in psychological burden cannot be overstated when considering sleep quality. Imagine the contrast: an emperor lying awake, worrying about reports of unrest in Gaul, the grain supply from Egypt, threats along the German frontier, and plots within his own court, versus a potter who, having completed his day's work, can rest with concerns limited to more immediate and manageable problems. Which mind would settle more easily into sleep? That's not to romanticize the often difficult lives of ordinary Romans or to suggest they slept without care. Economic insecurity, health concerns, and the various hardships of ancient life certainly affected their rest. But the particular kind of sleep disruption associated with imperial power, the combination of hypervigilance, paranoia, and overwhelming responsibility, was uniquely concentrated in the imperial bedroom. This contrast between imperial and common sleep contains a lesson that remains relevant today. Our modern pursuit of comfort and status may sometimes work against the very sleep quality we hope to improve. The emperor on his feather-stuffed mattress, surrounded by guards and sleep slaves, may have slept more poorly than the baker on his simple pallet, exhausted from a day of physical work and free from the burdens of geopolitical concern. Roman sleep patterns across all social classes shared some important differences from our own. The concept of biphasic sleep, sleeping in 2 segments with a period of wakefulness between, appears to have been common throughout Roman society. Without artificial lighting to extend the day, Romans typically went to bed earlier than we do, often rising for a period in the middle of the night before returning to sleep until dawn. This pattern aligns with what sleep historians have observed across many pre-industrial societies. The first sleep period would begin shortly after sunset and last for several hours. The midnight waking might be used for prayer, meditation, conversation, intimate relations, or simple household tasks that could be accomplished by lamplight. The second sleep would then continue until first light. This natural rhythm, interrupted by our modern lighting and schedules, may actually be more aligned with human biological needs than our current ideal of 8 uninterrupted hours. For ordinary Romans, this biphasic pattern would have been shaped by practical concerns as well. The need to tend to animals, check on a cooking fire, or simply address bodily needs in an era before indoor plumbing would have created natural interruptions in sleep. Rather than seeing these interruptions as problematic, as we often do today, Romans incorporated them into their expected sleep rhythm. What emerges from this comparison is not a simple narrative of privileged imperial sleep versus deprived common sleep, but rather a complex picture in which emperors, despite their material advantages, may often have slept worse than the citizens they ruled. It's a reminder that sleep quality depends on much more than just physical comfort. Psychological, environmental, and lifestyle factors play equally important roles in determining how well we rest. As we continue our exploration of Roman imperial sleep habits, I hope you're finding these historical insights valuable. If you're enjoying this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more historical journeys through sleep. I'm curious to know, do you think you would have slept better as an emperor or as an ordinary Roman citizen? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In our next section, we'll explore how the legacy of Roman sleep habits influences our modern understanding and practices around sleep. The sleep practices of ancient Rome, both imperial and common, may seem distant from our modern experience, yet their influence continues to shape our understanding of sleep in surprising ways. The Romans' relationship with sleep offers both cautionary tales and wisdom that remains relevant in our sleep-deprived modern world. Perhaps the most significant legacy of Roman sleep habits is found in language itself. The Latin word insomnia has passed directly into English and many other languages, carrying its ancient meaning largely intact. When we speak of burning the midnight oil, a phrase that evokes the Roman oil lamps that enabled night work, we connect ourselves to imperial administrators working by lamplight on the business of empire. Sound effect, quill scratching on papyrus, subtle oil lamp flickering. Even our word cubicle, now associated with office work, derives from the Latin cubiculum, or bedroom, a linguistic evolution that speaks volumes about how work has invaded spaces once reserved for rest. The emperor's devoted attendants working through the night have their modern equivalents in employees answering emails at midnight from their bedrooms. The boundaries between work and rest as permeable now as they were then, though for different reasons. Understanding of the connection between physical health and sleep quality feels surprisingly modern. Their emphasis on exercise, bathing, and moderation in food and drink as prerequisites for good sleep aligns well with contemporary sleep hygiene recommendations. The Emperor Augustus's disciplined approach to health and rest, regular exercise, moderate eating, and consistent sleep schedules could be lifted from a modern wellness blog. Yet the Romans also recognized what we sometimes forget, that peace of mind is as essential to good sleep as physical comfort. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher and tutor to Emperor Nero, wrote extensively about the importance of mental tranquility for sleep quality. "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare," he wrote. "It is because we do not dare that things are difficult." His prescription for insomnia focused not on the bedroom environment or physical habits, but on inner philosophical attitude, advice that anticipates modern cognitive approaches to insomnia treatment. Imagine carrying Seneca's wisdom into your own bedroom tonight. As you lie down, perhaps ruminating on worries or replaying the day's events, you might hear the echo of his advice across the centuries. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. The anxious emperor and the anxious modern professional share more than they might realize. The Roman recognition of sleep as vulnerable time requiring protection also resonates today. Where imperial bedrooms had guards at the doors and sometimes weapons within reach, we have alarm systems and locked doors. The fundamental human need for security during our most vulnerable hours transcends time and culture, connecting us directly to our ancient predecessors. The Roman practice of biphasic sleep, sleeping in two segments with a period of wakefulness between, has attracted significant attention from modern sleep researchers. Historical evidence suggests this pattern was common across pre-industrial societies, not just in Rome, and some sleep scientists argue it may be more natural than our current ideal of 8 uninterrupted hours. Sound effect. If you've ever awakened in the middle of the night and found yourself unable to immediately return to sleep, perhaps you've experienced frustration at this sleep maintenance insomnia. Yet, viewed through the lens of Roman sleep patterns, this midnight waking might be seen not as a disorder, but as an expression of your body's natural rhythm. The Romans would have used this time productively, for reflection, intimate conversation, or creative thought, rather than anxiously trying to force an immediate return to sleep. Modern sleep science increasingly recognizes the validity of diverse sleep patterns. While the 8-hour block remains ideal for many, alternative patterns including biphasic sleep and siesta cultures suggest there may be multiple healthy approaches to rest. In embracing this diversity, we perhaps return to a more Roman understanding of sleep as adaptable to individual needs and circumstances, rather than rigidly prescribed. The Roman understanding of dreams also continues to influence our culture. While we've largely abandoned the notion of dreams as direct divine messages, the idea that dreams reveal important subconscious content remains central to modern psychology. From Freud to contemporary dream research, the Roman belief that dreams contain meaningful psychological material persists, though reinterpreted through scientific rather than religious frameworks. When Artemidorus of Daldis compiled his 5-volume Oneirocritica, or Interpretation of Dreams, in the 2nd century CE, a work that would have been known to educated Romans, he was creating a precedent for analytical approaches to dream content that continues to this day. His systematic categorization of dream types and meanings prefigures modern dream research, though with different explanatory mechanisms. Sound effect, the sound of pages turning. The Roman emphasis on the bedroom as a specialized space for sleep also has modern parallels. Sleep experts now recommend that beds be used primarily for sleep and intimacy, not for work or entertainment. Advice that would have seemed obvious to Romans, who typically used their cubicula exclusively for these purposes. Our contemporary challenge of screens and devices in the bedroom might be new, but the principle of protecting sleep space from intrusions is ancient. Even some of the more exotic Roman sleep remedies have their modern equivalents. Where Romans might have placed dill seeds beneath their pillows or consumed lettuce juice for its supposed soporific properties, we have lavender sprays for pillows and melatonin supplements. The forms have evolved, but the human desire to enhance sleep through external aids remains constant. Perhaps most relevant to our modern context is the Roman experience of how power and responsibility affected sleep. The insomnia of emperors, lying awake beneath the weight of imperial concerns, has its parallel in the sleep difficulties reported by modern political leaders, executives and others in positions of high responsibility. Barack Obama, during his presidency, spoke of lying awake worrying about decisions that affected millions. Roman emperors would have understood completely. This connection between power and sleeplessness serves as both warning and comfort. For those in positions of authority, the Roman imperial experience cautions that even absolute power cannot command restful sleep. Indeed, it may make it more elusive. For ordinary people struggling with sleep issues, there's perhaps some comfort in knowing that even the most privileged humans throughout history have shared this struggle. As we navigate our own complex relationship with sleep in the modern world, with our unprecedented control over light and temperature, yet unprecedented levels of stress and stimulation, the Roman experience offers valuable perspective. Their world, so different from ours in many ways, reminds us that the fundamental human need for restorative sleep transcends time and culture, connecting us directly to our ancient predecessors. The emperors in their palaces and the commoners in their insulae, despite their vastly different circumstances, shared the universal human experience of closing their eyes each night, hoping for the blessing of peaceful sleep. In this most basic of human needs, the distance between ancient Rome and our modern world collapses, reminding us of our enduring connection to those who came before us. We're nearing the end of our historical journey through Roman imperial sleep habits. If you've found value in this exploration, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more historical perspectives on sleep. Your support helps us continue creating these deep dives into how humans throughout history have approached rest. I'd love to know, has this discussion changed how you think about your own sleep patterns? Share your reflections in the comments below. Now let's bring our journey to a peaceful close with some final thoughts on what the Roman imperial sleep experience can teach us about our own relationship with rest. Before we draw our journey to a close, let's explore how the Romans approached sleep from a medical perspective, and how imperial physicians attempted to address the sleep troubles of their powerful patients. The most influential physician of the Roman imperial period was Galen, a Greek doctor who served as personal physician to several emperors, including Marcus Aurelius. Born in 129 CE in Pergamon, in modern-day Turkey, Galen brought a systematic approach to medicine that would dominate Western medical thought for over a millennium. Sound effect: gentle footsteps on marble floors. Imagine yourself in the imperial palace following the distinguished physician Galen as he makes his way to attend to the emperor. His reputation precedes him. Having treated gladiators early in his career, he possesses an unusual knowledge of anatomy. His approach combines careful observation with theories based on the concept of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. For Galen and other Roman physicians, sleep disturbances were understood as imbalances in these humors. Insomnia might be attributed to an excess of yellow bile, creating too much heat and dryness in the body. The treatment? Foods and remedies believed to cool and moisten the system. Lettuce features prominently in Roman medical texts as a sleep aid, precisely because of its cooling, moistening properties. Soft, thoughtful music begins. Sleep is produced when the brain is moistened and blood flows abundantly to it, wrote Galen. This understanding led to specific prescriptions for imperial insomniacs: cool baths before bed, head compresses soaked in poppy extract, and diets featuring foods considered cooling and calming to the system. Close your eyes and imagine an imperial bedchamber prepared according to Galen's instructions. The emperor has just emerged from a tepid bath designed to cool his supposedly overheated constitution. The room has been ventilated to ensure cool air circulation. By his bedside sits a silver cup containing a sleep remedy, perhaps poppy extract mixed with wine and honey, or a concoction of lettuce juice, dill, and almond milk. The bedding has been arranged with cooling linens rather than warming wools, regardless of the season, to counteract the perceived excess of heat, causing the imperial insomnia. Sound effect: liquid being poured into a cup. For emperors like Hadrian, who suffered from painful conditions, including what modern historians believe may have been heart disease, sleep presented a particular challenge. Pain and discomfort would keep him awake, yet the opiates available to relieve that pain might create their own problems with dependency and diminishing effectiveness over time. Galen's approach in such cases involved not just physical treatments, but also recommendations for mental preparation for sleep, creating what we might now call good sleep hygiene. Roman medical texts reveal a sophisticated understanding of the connection between mental state and sleep quality. The physician Rufus of Ephesus, who practiced during the reigns of Trajan and Hadrian, wrote extensively on melancholia, depression, and its effects on sleep. He recognized what we now call depression-related insomnia and recommended treatments including massage, gentle exercise, and avoiding disturbing thoughts before bedtime. Music shifts slightly. For imperial patients, physicians developed specialized approaches that acknowledge their unique circumstances. Recognizing that emperors could not simply abandon their responsibilities, doctors like Galen advised specific times for handling stressful matters, never just before sleep. They might recommend that difficult imperial decisions or troubling reports from the provinces be addressed in the morning, when the mind was fresh, rather than in the evening hours when such concerns might follow the emperor to bed. The Roman medical understanding of sleep also recognized the concept of sleep cycles throughout the night, though explained differently than our modern understanding. The physician Soranus of Ephesus, who practiced in Rome during the reigns of Trajan and Hadrian, described different qualities of sleep during different portions of the night. Early sleep was considered heavier and more restorative, while pre-dawn sleep was thought to be lighter and more prone to vivid dreams. In effect, distant rooster crowing faintly. This understanding led to specific recommendations for those suffering from sleep difficulties. Patients struggling to fall asleep initially might be prescribed stronger remedies to be taken at the beginning of the night, while those who woke in the early hours and could not return to sleep might receive different treatments specifically for that phase of disturbed rest. Imperial physicians also recognized the negative health impacts of chronic sleep deprivation, though their understanding was framed in terms of humoral imbalances rather than our modern concepts of hormone disruption and neurological impacts. Galen observed that prolonged sleeplessness led to what he called drying of the brain, causing irritability, poor judgment, and eventually more serious physical and mental deterioration. Can you imagine the challenge faced by imperial physicians treating a ruler like Caligula? Historical accounts of his behavior, erratic decision-making, paranoia, and extreme mood swings, align remarkably well with what we now know are symptoms of severe sleep deprivation. Yet a physician suggesting that the emperor's judgment was impaired due to lack of sleep might themselves face dangerous consequences for implying imperial weakness or incapacity. Archaeological evidence provides interesting insights into sleep medicine in the Roman world. Excavations of medical implements have uncovered specialized tools that may have been used to administer sleep remedies, including fine bronze sieves for preparing herbal infusions and small, long-handled spoons that could have delivered measured doses of sleep-inducing preparations. One particularly interesting archaeological find comes from the medical quarter of the Roman military hospital at Vindonissa in modern Switzerland. There, researchers discovered vessels containing residues of herbs known for their sedative properties, including valerian and hops. While not directly connected to imperial medicine, this finding suggests that sleep treatment was considered important enough to be part of standard military medical care. And what was available to soldiers would certainly have been available in more refined forms to emperors. Contemplative music returns softly. The empirical nature of Roman medicine meant that effective treatments were often discovered and utilized even without understanding the exact mechanisms behind them. Valerian root, which contains compounds now known to interact with GABA receptors in the brain, similar to modern anti-anxiety medications, was prescribed for nervous insomnia. Chamomile, which contains apigenin, a mild tranquilizer, was commonly used in sleep preparations. The sedative effects of poppy were well known, though used with more caution than other herbal remedies due to their potency. For Roman emperors, access to these remedies was unlimited, a benefit of their position, but also a potential danger. Without modern understanding of dosage, dependence, or long-term effects, imperial patients might easily develop problematic relationships with sleep aids. The historian Suetonius hints at this possibility in his description of Claudius, noting that he sometimes needed to be carried away from the dinner table overcome with food and wine, suggesting that self-medication for sleep through alcohol may have been one of his coping mechanisms. Despite these limitations, Roman sleep medicine contained significant wisdom. The emphasis on establishing consistent pre-sleep routines, the recognition of environmental factors in sleep quality, and the understanding that mental state affects physical rest all align with modern sleep science. The Romans may have explained these connections through the theory of humors rather than neurotransmitters and hormones, but their practical approaches often led to effective interventions. The lasting influence of Greco-Roman sleep medicine extended far beyond the fall of the empire. Medical texts by Galen, Soranus, and others were preserved and translated by Arab scholars during the Middle Ages, eventually returning to Europe during the Renaissance to influence the development of modern Western medicine. Their observations about sleep and its disorders, while framed in ancient terminology, contained clinical insights that remain relevant today. Sound effect: pages turning in an ancient book. For emperors troubled by insomnia, the presence of the imperial physician offered both practical treatments and perhaps psychological comfort, the reassurance that even this most personal of struggles could be addressed through the best medical knowledge of the age. Whether these interventions effectively countered the unique sleep challenges of imperial power remains an open question, one that the historical record, with its accounts of troubled imperial nights, suggests may often have been answered in the negative. If you're finding these insights into Roman sleep medicine fascinating, please take a moment to like this video and consider subscribing to our channel for more historical explorations of sleep. I'm curious, have you ever tried any ancient sleep remedies like valerian or chamomile? Share your experiences in the comments below. Now, let's explore how dreams were understood and interpreted in Imperial Rome, and how they sometimes shaped the course of history itself. Few aspects of sleep fascinated the Romans more than dreams. Far from being considered mere curiosities or random neural firings, dreams in the Roman world held profound significance. They were potential messages from the gods, omens of things to come, or reflections of hidden truths. For emperors, whose dreams might be interpreted as having significance for the entire empire, this dimension of sleep carried particular weight. Imagine yourself as the Emperor Augustus, awakening from a vivid dream on an important morning. Would you keep it to yourself? Share it only with close advisors? Or, as Augustus sometimes did, issue an edict requiring anyone who dreamed about you to proclaim it publicly? Dreams in Imperial Rome existed in this complex intersection of the deeply personal and the explicitly political. Sound effect: temple bells, subtle and distant. The Romans inherited much of their dream interpretation from the Greeks, particularly through the work of Artemidorus, whose 5-volume Oneirocritica, Interpretation of Dreams, compiled thousands of dream accounts and their meanings. This systematic approach to dream interpretation reflected the Roman love of order and categorization. Dreams weren't simply random, but followed patterns that could be decoded by those with the proper knowledge. Can you picture a professional dream interpreter being summoned to the imperial palace before dawn? Perhaps the emperor has experienced a troubling dream, seeing himself crowned with a wreath of cypress leaves associated with death, rather than laurel, symbolizing victory. The interpreter would approach this task with both caution and methodology, knowing that their interpretation could influence imperial decisions, yet also aware that an unpopular interpretation might anger their powerful client. Contemplative, slightly mysterious music begins. Imperial dreams took on special significance because of a fundamental Roman belief. Dreams concerning the state or its ruler were not merely personal, but potentially prophetic for the entire empire. Cicero, in his work on divination, expressed the common Roman view that the gods send dreams concerning matters that affect the state to those in high positions. This belief placed enormous weight on imperial dreams and their interpretation. Julius Caesar, days before his assassination, reportedly dreamed that he was flying above the clouds and shaking hands with Jupiter. His wife Calpurnia, the night before his murder, dreamed she held his bleeding body in her arms. When she begged him not to attend the Senate the next day, Caesar was initially inclined to heed this warning, but was persuaded otherwise by conspirators who wanted him present. Dreams and their interpretation could literally be matters of life and death. Sound effect: heartbeat, slow and ominous. The Emperor Augustus took dreams particularly seriously, both his own and those of others concerning him. Suetonius tells us that Augustus experienced a dream before the Battle of Philippi, where his physician Minerva advised him to rise from his sickbed and join the battle despite his illness. Following this dream's guidance, he was carried to the battlefield on a litter, and his forces proved victorious. This experience reportedly cemented Augustus's belief in the prophetic nature of dreams. So seriously did Augustus take dreams that he issued an edict requiring anyone who dreamed about him to proclaim it in the marketplace the next morning. Can you imagine the scene? Citizens gathering in the Roman Forum, some perhaps genuinely reporting dreams about their emperor, others inventing flattering visions to curry favor. Imperial dream collection became a form of political theater, reinforcing the emperor's divine associations while also serving as an early warning system for sentiment about his rule. Music shifts slightly. Certain temples in the Roman world specialized in what was called incubation, the practice of sleeping in a sacred space specifically to receive divine dreams. The most famous were temples to Asclepius, the god of healing, where patients would sleep hoping to receive dreams prescribing treatments for their ailments. Some Roman emperors, particularly those facing difficult decisions or health problems, practiced their own versions of dream incubation, sleeping in specially prepared rooms where divine guidance might more readily reach them. Imagine the Emperor Hadrian, troubled by his chronic health problems and the question of succession, preparing for a night of dream incubation. The room has been purified with offerings of incense. He has fasted during the day and abstained from wine, following traditional preparations for receiving prophetic dreams. As he lies down, priests may recite prayers or perform rituals believed to invite divine communication through dreams. Whether the resulting dreams came from gods or his own subconscious deliberations, the practice provided a structured way to access deeper wisdom. Sound effect, soft chanting, barely audible. Dreams could also serve as political tools. The Emperor Septimius Severus, who seized power in 993 CE after a period of civil war, claimed to have had dreams predicting his rise to the purple before it occurred. By publicizing these dreams after the fact, he reinforced the narrative that his rule was divinely ordained, rather than the result of military coup. Similarly, Constantine's famous dream before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, in which he reportedly saw the Christian symbol and the words, "In this sign, conquer," was used to justify his eventual support of Christianity. Not all imperial dreams were welcome or positive. Many emperors reportedly suffered from nightmares that reflected their fears or guilty consciences. Nero, after murdering his mother Agrippina, was said to be haunted by her in his dreams. Caracalla, after killing his brother Geta, reportedly saw his sibling's ghost in nightmares, sword in hand. These accounts, while perhaps embellished by historians with moral agendas, reflect the Roman belief that dreams could serve as a conduit for justice that transcended even imperial power. Music becomes more intense, then fades. For ordinary Romans, dreams about emperors created a complex situation. Reporting a negative dream about the emperor could be interpreted as treasonous, yet failing to report a dream that might be prophetic could be seen as negligence toward the state. Tacitus tells the story of Junia Silana during Nero's reign, who was accused of treason partly on the basis of allegedly having had or reported dreams considered threatening to the emperor. Dream reporting became a dangerous form of political speech, requiring careful navigation. Professional dream interpreters in imperial Rome walked a similarly delicate line. Their interpretations needed to be honest enough to maintain credibility, yet diplomatic enough to avoid offense. The 2nd century writer Artemidorus advised dream interpreters serving powerful clients to consider not just the dream's standard meaning, but also the rank of the dreamer, their character, their habits, their age, and their current circumstances, creating space for interpretations that could be both truthful and politically expedient. Contemplative music returns. Romans classified dreams into different categories, some considered more significant than others. Macrobius, writing in the 5th century CE, outlined 5 types: the enigmatic dream, requiring interpretation; the prophetic vision, clearly foretelling the future; the oracular dream, in which a parent, priest, or deity explicitly states what will happen; the nightmare; and the ordinary dream caused by physical or psychological states. Imperial dreams were typically assumed to fall into one of the first 3 categories: meaningful communications rather than mere physical phenomena. The physical environment was thought to influence dream content. Romans believed that sleeping with the head to the east promoted prophetic dreams, while certain herbs or foods eaten before sleep could either encourage or discourage vivid dreaming. Imperial bedchambers might be arranged with these factors in mind, particularly on nights when significant dreams were sought. Certain stones placed under the pillow, such as amethyst, whose name derives from Greek words meaning not intoxicated, were believed to promote clear, truthful dreams. Sound effect, soft rustling as someone arranges bedding. The relationship between imperial dreams and sleep quality created an interesting tension. Vivid, memorable dreams typically occur during REM sleep, which requires a certain level of sleep quality to reach. Yet the stress and sleep disturbances common to many emperors would have reduced their REM sleep. Some of the sleep aids prescribed by Roman physicians may have been sought specifically to enable the dream experiences considered so valuable for divine guidance. Think about this paradox. Emperors seeking medication not just to rest, but to dream properly. The physician Galen, when treating Marcus Aurelius for sleep difficulties, would have been aware that his treatments needed to promote not just rest, but the proper conditions for imperial dreams that might guide state decisions. Sleep medicine and religious practice blended in ways that our compartmentalized modern approach might find difficult to reconcile. Dream interpretation was not merely superstition, but an institutionalized part of Roman governance. The Senate maintained official dream interpreters, and imperial administrative records suggest specialized staff responsible for collecting and analyzing dreams related to the emperor. Dreams were considered one form of omen among many that responsible rulers should attend to, along with unusual natural events, the flight patterns of birds, and the entrails of sacrificial animals. This official dimension of dream interpretation reminds us that for Romans, the boundary between what we would consider religion, psychology, and political intelligence gathering was essentially non-existent. Imperial dreams and their interpretation existed in all these realms simultaneously, providing psychological insight for the emperor, religious connection to the divine, and political information about how the ruler and his actions were perceived by both gods and mortals. For those of us listening from a modern perspective, there's a fascinating parallel between Roman dream interpretation and contemporary psychological approaches to dreams. Both recognize that dreams reveal important content from parts of our mind not directly accessible during waking hours. The Roman emphasis on recording dreams immediately upon waking, analyzing their symbols, and considering their emotional impact would not seem out of place in a modern therapist's office, though the explanatory frameworks differ dramatically. The imperial relationship with dreams offers another window into the peculiar burdens of Roman rule. Even in sleep, perhaps especially in sleep, the emperor was never fully private, never simply an individual. His dreams, like every other aspect of his existence, belonged partly to the state, subject to interpretation and scrutiny. The most intimate experience of sleep, the dreams that came unbidden in the night, could become matters of public record and political significance. This blend of the personal and political in imperial dreams reflects broader Roman attitudes toward leadership. The emperor was expected to subordinate even his subconscious to the needs of Rome, to find meaning and guidance in his dreams, not just for himself, but for the empire. It's a concept of leadership that differs markedly from our modern emphasis on work-life separation, yet one that contains its own profound wisdom about the integration of personal insight and public responsibility. Dreams continue to fascinate us today, though perhaps with less political significance than they held for Roman emperors. If you're enjoying these explorations of ancient sleep and dream practices, please take a moment to like this video and consider subscribing for more historical journeys. I'm curious, do you pay attention to your dreams or find meaning in them? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let's travel to another dimension of imperial sleep by exploring how emperors slept during their frequent military campaigns, far from the comforts of the palace. Roman emperors weren't just administrators governing from palace bedchambers. Many were warrior leaders who spent considerable time on military campaigns. From Julius Caesar's conquest of Gaul to Trajan's Dacian wars, Roman rulers often commanded from the field, experiencing sleep conditions dramatically different from their palatial accommodations in Rome. Imagine yourself as the Emperor Trajan, campaigning against the Dacian tribes in what is now Romania around 106 CE. Instead of your marble-lined bedroom on the Palatine Hill, you're now sleeping in a leather tent in the heart of a military camp. The sounds around you are not the distant street noises of Rome, but the murmurs of 20,000 legionaries, the clank of weapons being maintained, and perhaps the distant howling of wolves in the Carpathian forests. Sound effect? Distant metallic sounds of a military camp, low voices. While on campaign, even emperors were subject to military necessity and tradition. The Roman army operated with remarkable standardization, including in its approach to sleep and camp arrangements. Camps were constructed according to consistent layouts, with the commander's quarters, the praetorium, always located in a specific position. For an emperor in the field, this tent or temporary structure would be more elaborate than others, but still recognized as part of military tradition, rather than an attempt to recreate palace luxury. Can you picture this imperial campaign tent? Larger than those of ordinary officers, it would typically be divided into sections, a sleeping area, a space for meetings with, and perhaps a small dining area. Braziers would provide heat in cold weather, though fire risks limited their use. The emperor's personal guards would be stationed immediately outside, creating a perimeter of security within the already well-defended camp. Contemplative music with subtle martial elements begins. Julius Caesar, whose campaigns took him from Gaul to Egypt, was known for his ability to sleep under difficult conditions. Suetonius tells us he could sleep soundly on his campaign cot, even amid the noise and activity of the camp. This adaptability served him well during years of near-constant warfare, allowing him to remain sharp and decisive despite the physical challenges of campaign life. The Emperor Trajan similarly embraced military austerity during his campaigns, deliberately sharing many of the same conditions as his soldiers, including simplified sleeping arrangements. This approach reflected both practical necessity and political wisdom. Roman soldiers respected leaders who would endure the same hardships they faced. By contrast, the Emperor Lucius Verus, co-ruler with Marcus Aurelius, was criticized for bringing excessive luxury to his military headquarters during the Parthian campaign, including elaborate sleeping arrangements that set him apart from his officers. Sound effect: canvas tent, flapping in light wind. Sleep timing during military campaigns followed a different rhythm than civilian life. The Roman army divided the night into 4 watches, vigiliae, each lasting approximately 3 hours. The changing of the guard would be marked by trumpet calls that punctuated the night, sounds that nearby military commanders, including emperors, would hear throughout their sleep. This regimented approach to time necessary for security imposed a structure on sleep that differed significantly from palace life. Imagine lying on your campaign cot as Emperor Hadrian inspecting frontier fortifications in Britain around 122 CE. The night is divided not by your personal preference, but by military necessity. The trumpet marking the second watch might wake you briefly, reminding you that 4 soldiers have just begun their 3-hour vigilance at each gate of the camp. Your body adjusts to this rhythm over time, perhaps waking slightly before each call in anticipation of the sound. Sound effect: distant trumpet call, brief and martial. Security concerns affected imperial sleep dramatically during campaigns. While assassination was always a risk for emperors, military contexts added the dangers of enemy action. When campaigning in hostile territory, Roman emperors faced the possibility of surprise attacks, necessitating higher levels of readiness even during rest periods. Historical accounts suggest that some emperors slept in partial armor when close to enemy forces, sacrificing comfort for the ability to respond quickly to threats. The physical accommodations for sleep during campaigns were necessarily simplified. Instead of the wool-stuffed mattresses of the palace, campaign beds typically consisted of stuffed leather bags on folding wooden frames, the Roman equivalent of modern military cots. These could be quickly assembled or packed away as the army moved. For bedding, military cloaks, saga, doubled as blankets, supplemented with fur throws in colder climates. Temperature regulation, already challenging in imperial bedrooms, became even more difficult during campaigns. Tent walls provided minimal insulation against cold, and campaigns in regions like Britain, Germany, or the Danube frontier often meant sleeping in temperatures far colder than Romans were accustomed to in Italy. Conversely, campaigns in places like Mesopotamia or Egypt brought sweltering heat that canvas tents did little to mitigate. Can you feel the chill of a British night seeping through your woolen blankets? Or perhaps the oppressive heat of a Syrian summer, where even night brings little relief? Roman emperors experienced these extremes firsthand during their campaigns, their sleep affected by climates dramatically different from the moderate Mediterranean conditions of Rome. The impact of these conditions on imperial health could be significant. The Emperor Septimius Severus, whose campaigns took him from Mesopotamia to Scotland, died at York, Roman Eboracum, in 211 CE, after years of punishing campaign conditions had exacerbated his gout and other health problems. The combination of sleep disruption, physical hardship, and exposure to extreme weather took a toll even on emperors who had risen from military backgrounds. Sound effect: coughing, someone shifting uncomfortably on a bed. Yet, campaign life also offered some potential sleep benefits. The physical exertion involved in military activities, riding, walking the camp, participating in ceremonies, provided the kind of natural fatigue that promotes deep sleep. The simplified diet typical of campaign life, less rich and served at more regular hours than palace feasts, may have been more conducive to good rest. And the clear purpose and focus of military objectives might have provided a psychological clarity that eased the burden of complex imperial decisions. For some emperors, campaign sleep may actually have been better than palace sleep in important ways. Away from the court intrigues of Rome, with their immediate security handled by trusted legionaries rather than potentially untrustworthy palace guards, emperors might have found a different kind of rest. Still challenging physically, but perhaps less psychologically burdensome. Contemplative music returns more strongly. The Emperor Hadrian, who spent more than half of his 21-year reign traveling the empire, seems to have thrived under these conditions. Though not fighting active wars for most of his travels, he lived under conditions similar to military campaigns as he inspected frontiers and visited provinces. His famous restless energy found productive outlets in this constant movement, perhaps allowing him better rest than the confines of Rome would have permitted for his active temperament. Sleep during campaigns also had important symbolic dimensions. By sleeping in a military camp surrounded by legionaries, an emperor demonstrated his connection to Rome's martial traditions and to the army that increasingly determined who would wear the purple. The public nature of campaign life, where the emperor was visible to his troops in ways impossible within palace walls, created both constraints and opportunities for imperial image-making. Imagine the scene as Emperor Marcus Aurelius prepares for sleep in his campaign tent along the Danube frontier, where he spent much of his final years fighting Germanic tribes. Officers have just left after an evening strategy council. As slaves remove his armor and prepare his simple campaign bed, legionaries outside can glimpse their emperor through the partially open tent flap, a man visibly burdened by responsibility, yet sharing their martial hardship. These moments humanize the emperor to his troops while reinforcing his authority through visible commitment to their common cause. The campaign environment also affected the dream life of emperors. Roman military camps maintained religious practices, including augury and attention to omens, that paralleled those in Rome itself. Dreams experienced during campaigns might be seen as particularly significant, especially before battles or key decisions. Julius Caesar's famous dream before crossing the Rubicon, in which he reportedly saw himself having incestuous relations with his mother, interpreted as union with Mother Earth, meaning Rome, exemplifies how dream interpretation continued to influence leadership decisions even in military contexts. Sound effect: night sounds of a military camp, distant voices, occasional metallic sounds. For emperors who were essentially career soldiers before taking the throne, men like Vespasian, Trajan, or Septimius Severus, the rhythms and conditions of campaign sleep were familiar, perhaps even more comfortable than the unfamiliar luxury of the palace. These soldier emperors often maintained simpler sleeping habits even when in Rome, preferring military discipline to palatial indulgence. Vespasian, who rose from relatively humble origins to the purple, was known for maintaining his pre-dawn rising schedule throughout his reign, reflecting military habits formed during his extensive campaigns. The shared experience of campaign sleep created bonds between emperors and their soldiers that could prove politically valuable. When Vespasian was proclaimed emperor by his troops in 69 CE, his willingness to share their hardships, including sleep conditions, during previous campaigns in Britain and Judea, had built the loyalty that helped him prevail in the year of 4 emperors. Soldiers who had seen their commander sleeping on a campaign cot similar to their own were more likely to fight for his cause than for distant rivals known only by reputation. Music returns softly. Even in these austere conditions, however, certain imperial privileges remained. Historical accounts suggest that emperors on campaign still traveled with personal physicians who would provide sleep remedies as needed. The challenge of maintaining imperial health during military expeditions meant that sleep quality remained a medical concern, with adapted versions of the treatments available in Rome provided under field conditions. Can you picture the imperial physician preparing a sleep remedy in a campaign tent, perhaps grinding dried herbs brought specifically for this purpose, mixing them with wine from the emperor's personal stores, carefully measuring a dose that will promote rest without causing morning drowsiness that might affect military decision-making? Even in the field, the emperor's sleep remained a matter of state importance, worthy of specialized attention. The transition between campaign sleep and palace sleep created its own challenges. Roman accounts suggest that some emperors struggled to readjust to palace life after extended campaigns, finding the quiet and isolation of imperial bedchambers disconcerting after months of sleeping amid the sounds of a military camp. This early form of what we might now call reverse culture shock affected sleep patterns as the emperor's body and mind adjusted to dramatically different sleeping environments. What emerges from this exploration of imperial sleep during military campaigns is a picture of remarkable adaptability. Roman emperors, for all their power and privilege, accepted the necessity of adjusting their most personal habits, including sleep, to the demands of military leadership. This flexibility, this willingness to move between the marble bedroom and the leather tent as duty required, reflects a core aspect of Roman imperial identity. The ruler as both civilian administrator and military commander, comfortable in both roles. The demands of military leadership haven't changed entirely over the centuries. If you're finding these explorations of imperial sleep on campaign interesting, please take a moment to like this video and consider subscribing for more historical journeys. I'm curious, do you find that your own sleep changes significantly when you're away from home? Share your experiences in the comments below. Now, let's examine how sleep differed for women in the imperial household, just exploring the unique challenges and practices of empresses and other imperial women. While our historical sources tend to focus on emperors, the Roman imperial household included powerful and influential women whose sleep experiences differed in significant ways from their male counterparts. Empresses, imperial daughters, and other high-ranking women navigated sleep within unique constraints and contexts that deserve exploration. Imagine yourself as Livia, wife of Emperor Augustus and one of the most powerful women in Roman history. Your sleeping arrangements reflect your exceptional status. You have your own cubiculum separate from your husband's, an arrangement common among elite Romans, but elevated to imperial grandeur in your case. Your bedroom is decorated with frescoes depicting scenes from mythology, perhaps showing the goddess Diana, with whom you've been associated in public imagery. Sound effect, soft footsteps on mosaic floor, gentle rustling of fabric. Unlike ordinary Roman wives, empresses like Livia often maintained separate sleeping quarters from their husbands, not as a sign of marital distance, but as a reflection of their independent status and household authority. Archaeological evidence from imperial palaces suggests that imperial women's bedrooms were often located in their own wings or sections of the palace, complete with dedicated staff and security. The physical environment of an empress's bedroom would have been similar in many ways to the emperor's. The same wool-stuffed mattresses on wooden frames, the same challenges with temperature regulation and lighting. However, historical sources suggest that imperial women's quarters sometimes contained additional elements reflecting gendered expectations of the time, such as more elaborate toilet areas for the application of cosmetics and arrangement of complicated hairstyles. Gentle, feminine-coded music begins softly. Can you picture the bedroom of Empress Plotina, wife of Trajan? Perhaps less austere than her husband's quarters, reflecting her known interest in philosophy and culture. Her sleeping area might include storage for the scrolls she was known to read, elegant furnishings that reflect her refined tastes, and space for the trusted female slaves who would attend to her personal needs. While not opulent by later standards, Plotina was known for her modesty. Her quarters would nevertheless reflect her status as one of the most powerful women in the empire. The sleep timing of imperial women often differed from that of emperors due to their different daily responsibilities. While emperors typically began their days with the salutatio, receiving clients and petitioners, empresses had their own morning routines focused on managing the imperial household, receiving female visitors, and attending to correspondence. This different rhythm might have allowed for slightly later rising times, though still early by modern standards. Sound effect: soft sounds of morning preparation, quiet female voices. Security concerns affected imperial women's sleep in complex ways. On one hand, empresses were potential targets for those seeking to harm the emperor indirectly or to influence succession through them. On the other hand, they were somewhat insulated from the direct threat of assassination that plagued emperors, as killing an empress did not automatically transfer power. This paradoxical position, both protected and vulnerable, created a unique sleep context where security was vital, but perhaps less immediately oppressive than for emperors themselves. Imperial women also faced distinctive health challenges that could affect sleep. Pregnancy and childbirth, crucial for dynastically minded imperial families, created significant sleep disruptions. Consider the experience of the younger Agrippina, mother of Nero, navigating pregnancy and postpartum recovery while simultaneously engaging in the complex power politics of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Her sleep would have been affected not just by physical discomfort, but by intense anxiety about the political implications of producing a male heir. Music shifts to something more tense, then returns to gentler tones. Childbearing expectations placed enormous pressure on imperial women, particularly those who struggled to produce male heirs. The Empress Sabina, wife of Hadrian, had no children, a circumstance that contributed to a reportedly difficult relationship with her husband and likely affected her psychological well-being, including her sleep quality. Historical sources suggest she endured significant stress in her role, caught between dynastic expectations and the reality of a childless imperial marriage. Beyond childbearing, imperial women navigated complex political waters that created their own sleep challenges. A politically active empress like Julia Domna, wife of Septimius Severus, and a key power broker in her own right, would have carried mental burdens not unlike those of emperors, potentially experiencing the same stress-induced insomnia that plagued her male counterparts as she managed relationships with senators, generals, and provincial governors. Sound effect: quill scratching on papyrus, seal being pressed into wax. Imagine Julia Domna in her private quarters late at night, perhaps unable to sleep as she composes letters to key political allies, strategizing how to secure her son Caracalla's position. The oil lamps burn low as she works, her mind too active with political calculations to find rest despite the late hour. Her sleep challenges stem not from the direct burden of rule, but from the complex work of influence and alliance building that characterized female power in imperial Rome. Medical treatments for sleep difficulties were gendered in Roman practice, with specific remedies developed for women's sleep issues. The physician Soranus of Ephesus, who practiced in Rome during the early imperial period, wrote extensively on women's health and included specific sleep recommendations for female patients. These often involved herbs like chamomile and lavender, believed to address both physical discomfort and what Romans considered typically female nervous conditions. For treating sleep difficulties in noble women, including those in the imperial household, Roman physicians might recommend specific bathing regimens before bed, particular scents considered calming to the female constitution, often floral rather than the herbal scents recommended for men, and gentle massage of the temples and neck. These gendered approaches reflected Roman beliefs about fundamental differences between male and female bodies and minds, beliefs that influenced healthcare from common treatments to imperial medicine. Sleep during pregnancy received particular attention in Roman medical texts. Serranus recommended specific sleeping positions for pregnant women, typically on the right side, particular bedding arrangements to reduce pressure points, and dietary adjustments believed to promote better rest during pregnancy. For imperial women, whose pregnancies carried such significant political weight, these recommendations would have been followed with particular care by household physicians. The dream lives of imperial women were also considered significant, though in ways that differed from male dreams. While an emperor's dreams might be interpreted as direct omens about the state, an empress's dreams were often interpreted in relation to fertility, family matters, or as indirect reflections on her husband's rule. However, some powerful imperial women, like Livia, had dreams that were treated with similar seriousness to those of emperors, a reflection of their exceptional political influence. Historical accounts mention several significant dreams of imperial women. Calpurnia's prophetic dream of Caesar's assassination is perhaps the most famous, but others appear in Roman histories. Livia reportedly dreamed of a phoenix symbolizing imperial renewal shortly before the birth of Tiberius, a dream later used to support his legitimacy as Augustus' successor. Such dreams became part of imperial mythology, shaping public perception of dynasties and succession. The social expectations placed on imperial women affected their sleep environments in material ways, while emperors might sleep with double. As our journey through the sleeping habits of Roman emperors draws to a close, let's take a moment to gather the threads of what we've discovered and consider what ancient wisdom we might carry into our own bedrooms tonight. We began in the imperial cubiculum, where emperors lay on wool-stuffed mattresses, surrounded by luxury, yet often unable to find the simple blessing of peaceful sleep. We explored how the burdens of imperial power, the constant vigilance, the fear of assassination, the weight of decisions affecting millions, created a perfect recipe for insomnia, even for those who commanded the known world. Gentle, soothing music begins. We walked the midnight corridors with Caligula restlessly awaiting a dawn that seemed never to come. We witnessed Tiberius on Capri, sleeping with his eyes partially open, a physical manifestation of the hypervigilance that characterized his reign. We saw how Nero's guilty conscience manifested in nightmares that drove him to seek constant distraction rather than face the quiet hours of night alone with his thoughts. Through these imperial sleep struggles, we glimpsed a profound truth that transcends time, that peaceful sleep comes not from power, or wealth, but from inner tranquility. The Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius understood this, writing in his Meditations, "No man can rob us of our free will," a perspective that helped him find rest even amid the endless demands of empire. Sound effect, soft wind chime. We contrasted imperial sleep with that of ordinary Romans, discovering that in some ways the humble baker or potter may have slept better than the emperor. Their physically demanding days, simpler diets, and freedom from the crushing responsibility of rule likely contributed to more restful nights, despite their less luxurious sleeping arrangements, a reminder that comfort and status do not necessarily translate to better sleep. We explored the physical realities of Roman sleep environments, the wool mattresses and oil lamps, the challenges of temperature regulation and noise control, and recognized both how far we've come in creating optimal sleep conditions and how similar our fundamental needs remain. The Roman emphasis on the bedroom as a dedicated space for sleep, their recognition of exercise and diet as contributors to rest, and their understanding of the mind-body connection in sleep quality all feel surprisingly modern. Music continues softly. As you listen to these words, perhaps already in bed or preparing for sleep, consider what lessons you might take from these ancient sleep experiences. Like the Romans, we exist in bodies that evolved long before our current civilization, with needs and rhythms that haven't fundamentally changed in thousands of years. The emperor on his lectus bed and you on your mattress share the same human necessity for rest, the same vulnerability in sleep, the same potential for dreams both troubling and transcendent. Perhaps there's wisdom in the Roman biphasic sleep pattern, the recognition that waking in the night need not be cause for frustration, but might be embraced as a natural part of human sleep rhythm. If you find yourself awake in the quiet hours, instead of checking the time and calculating the sleep you're losing, you might channel the Romans and use this time for quiet reflection, gentle movement, or peaceful meditation before returning to your second sleep. Sound effect, distant owl hooting, subtle night sounds. Or maybe you'll take inspiration from Augustus's disciplined approach to sleep hygiene, his moderation in food and drink, his regular exercise, his consistent sleep schedule. These practices, recognized as beneficial 2,000 years ago, have been validated by modern sleep science. The wisdom of the ancients often anticipates our latest discoveries. For those in positions of responsibility, whether leading companies, managing teams, or raising families, the cautionary tales of imperial insomnia remind us to create boundaries around our rest. Unlike Roman emperors who could never truly step away from the demands of empire, we can establish digital curfews, delegate effectively, and recognize that our best leadership comes when we are properly rested. The emperor who never slept made worse decisions than the one who prioritized recovery, a lesson as relevant in boardrooms today as it was in the Roman Senate. Music shifts to something more conclusive, but still gentle. The study of how Roman emperors slept reminds us that history is not just about great battles and political machinations, but also about the intimate, everyday experiences that connect us to our ancestors across the centuries. In the quiet vulnerability of sleep, emperors were as human as their subjects, a humbling reality that perhaps helped some of them rule with greater wisdom and compassion. As we conclude our historical journey, I invite you to close your eyes, if you haven't already, and imagine yourself once more in ancient Rome. The city has quieted for the night. Oil lamps cast their gentle glow through windows. On the Palatine Hill, an emperor turns restlessly on his bed, perhaps pondering a decision that will be recorded by historians for millennia to come. In an apartment across the city, a craftsman sleeps soundly after a day of honest work. In a villa outside the city walls, a wealthy merchant practices the sleep wisdom of Seneca, clearing his mind of anxieties before allowing sleep to come. They are all us, and we are them, humans seeking the same restoration that sleep has provided since before history began. In recognizing this connection, we find both perspective on our own sleep challenges and perhaps a moment of transcendence, joining the great human family across time in our shared need for rest. Sleep well, dear listeners. May your rest be more peaceful than Caligula's, more restorative than Nero's, and worthy of an emperor, or better yet, of a content and ordinary citizen of Rome, free from the burdens that kept the powerful awake through the long Mediterranean nights. Thank you for joining me on this historical journey. Until our next exploration of sleep through time, remember the words attributed to the Roman philosopher Seneca: "There is no tranquility of mind without virtuous living." Perhaps there is no better prescription for sleep than that ancient wisdom. As our journey through the sleeping habits of Roman emperors draws to a close, let's take a moment to gather the threads of what we've discovered and consider what ancient wisdom we might carry into our own bedrooms tonight. We began in the imperial cubiculum, where emperors lay on wool-stuffed mattresses, surrounded by luxury, yet often unable to find the simple blessing of peaceful sleep. We explored how the burdens of imperial power, the constant vigilance, the fear of assassination, the weight of decisions affecting millions, created a perfect recipe for insomnia, even for those who commanded the known world. We walked the midnight corridors with Caligula, restlessly awaiting a dawn that seemed never to come. We witnessed Tiberius on Capri, sleeping with his eyes partially open, a physical manifestation of the hypervigilance that characterized his reign. We saw how Nero's guilty conscience manifested in nightmares that drove him to seek constant distraction, rather than face the quiet hours of night alone with his thoughts. Through these imperial sleep struggles, we glimpsed a profound truth that transcends time: that peaceful sleep comes not from power or wealth, but from inner tranquility. The Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius understood this, writing in his Meditations, "No man can rob us of our free will," a perspective that helped him find rest, even amid the endless demands of empire. We contrasted imperial sleep with that of ordinary Romans, discovering that in some ways, the humble baker or potter may have slept better than the emperor. Their physically demanding days, simpler diets, and freedom from the crushing responsibility of rule likely contributed to more restful nights, despite their less luxurious sleeping arrangements. A reminder that comfort and status do not necessarily translate to better sleep. We explored the physical realities of Roman sleep environments, the wool mattresses and oil lamps, the challenges of temperature regulation and noise control, and recognized both how far we've come in creating optimal sleep conditions and how similar our fundamental needs remain. The Roman emphasis on the bedroom as a dedicated space for sleep, their recognition of exercise and diet as contributors to rest, and their understanding of the mind-body connection in sleep quality all feel surprisingly modern. As you listen to these words, perhaps already in bed or preparing for sleep, consider what lessons you might take from these ancient sleep experiences. Like the Romans, we exist in bodies that evolved long before our current civilization, with needs and rhythms that haven't fundamentally changed in thousands of years. The emperor on his lectious bed and you on your mattress share the same human necessity for rest, the same vulnerability in sleep, the same potential for dreams, both troubling and transcendent. Perhaps there's wisdom in the Roman biphasic sleep pattern, the recognition that waking in the night need not be cause for frustration, but might be embraced as a natural part of human sleep rhythm. If you find yourself awake in the quiet hours, instead of checking the time and calculating the sleep you're losing, you might channel the Romans and use this time for quiet reflection, gentle movement, or peaceful meditation before returning to your second sleep. Or maybe you'll take inspiration from Augustus's disciplined approach to sleep hygiene, his moderation in food and drink, his regular exercise, his consistent sleep schedule. These practices, recognized as beneficial 2,000 years ago, have been validated by modern sleep science. The wisdom of the ancients often anticipates our latest discoveries. For those in positions of responsibility, whether leading companies, managing teams, or raising families, the cautionary tales of imperial insomnia remind us to create boundaries around our rest. Unlike Roman emperors who could never truly step away from the demands of empire, we can establish digital curfews, delegate effectively, and recognize that our best leadership comes when we are properly rested. The emperor who never slept made worse decisions than the one who prioritized recovery, a lesson as relevant in boardrooms today as it was in the Roman Senate. The study of how Roman emperors slept reminds us that history is not just about great battles and political machinations, but also about the intimate, everyday experiences that connect us to our ancestors across the centuries. In the quiet vulnerability of sleep, emperors were as human as their subjects, a humbling reality that perhaps helped some of them rule with greater wisdom and compassion. As we conclude our historical journey, I invite you to close your eyes, if you haven't already, and imagine yourself once more in ancient Rome. The city has quieted for the night. Oil lamps cast their gentle glow through windows. On the Palatine Hill, an emperor turns restlessly on his bed, perhaps pondering a decision that will be recorded by historians for millennia to come. In an apartment across the city, a craftsman sleeps soundly after a day of honest work. In a villa outside the city walls, a wealthy merchant practices the sleep wisdom of Seneca, clearing his mind of anxieties before allowing sleep to come. They are all us, and we are them, humans seeking the same restoration that sleep has provided since before history began. In recognizing this connection, we find both perspective on our own sleep challenges and perhaps a moment of transcendence, joining the great human family across time in our shared need for rest. Sleep well, dear listeners. May your rest be more peaceful than Caligula's, more restorative than Nero's, and worthy of an emperor, or better yet, of a content and ordinary citizen of Rome, free from the burdens that kept the powerful awake through the long Mediterranean nights. Thank you for joining me on this historical journey. Until our next exploration of sleep through time, remember the words attributed to the Roman philosopher Seneca: There is no tranquility of mind without virtuous living. Perhaps there is no better prescription for sleep than that ancient wisdom.